Hi everyone, just coming back for the second of the sort of retrospective look backs at the stories that we've written. This one is Maple Lane, Horror at Maple Lane. We're sort of following the horror theme through in the titles. And this is probably, I think, certainly by memory, my least, I have watched it back, but it's my least favourite of the ones I've done. I've only done 4, well 5 if you include the one that's just coming out. And as we sort of went through the writing process, we're sort of taking some ideas forward to the next stories. This one didn't really have much going into it, and by the time I came to write this one, I already had the idea for the Storybook Woods one in my mind, so I was sort of like concentrating quite a lot on that. That's a lot more complicated, really, theme-wise. This one's sort of quite straightforward, and I thought if I'm going to continue doing these videos, what would be a good idea would be sort of to look back at the notes I'd made before I write the story, and some of them have sort of like quite comprehensive notes, and some of them are just very simple. And then I thought what I would do in future, going back when I sort of making notes, is write the notes that I have coming into playing the game, write the notes then that I got from the game, and then look at how that forms into the story. I can't do that for the ones I've already done, because I've just literally got pages of notes on ideas for stories and things like that. I can't tell you at what stage those ideas came to me, but literally this one is probably one of the first one I had no idea at all about anything. This one is sort of a follow-on, but I've got a line of notes. So we'll start with that. So the concept for Horror at Maple Lane is: Hans follows Ryko back from her time at Camp Happy Trails, somehow thinking he can find Laurie, ? He terrorises Maple Lane / Ryko. This leads to a victory where Ryko tells the police about Hans's exonerating Laurie, or the death of Ryko, where the police begin to see a pattern of the killings casting doubt onto Laurie's guilt, obviously setting up the final one. So I say, coming into this, interestingly enough, in my head this is my least favourite one, and I have rewatched it back, and I think it's got some really good bits and some really sort of like clunky bits as well. So as we go through, like I say, I'll try and sort of explain why I'm writing as I did, or what I'm trying to achieve by the writing. So I'm going to set it going now, and let's have a look at it. So we've got the new Final Girl, Tales from the Final Girl introduction, and we're just sort of starting off. Obviously we've got to get Hans to Maple Lane, so how are we going to achieve that is basically my first thought. And this, I really like this element of writing the stories, is like you take your characters, particularly as it's sort of following on. So we've taken the characters and we're putting them in a new setting, and the first thing we've got to sort of think of is how do we get to that setting. So it sort of gets the brain working about how we're getting there. And like I say, there's a lot of good things in this story. And this is this is one of them, or coming up will be one of them.
Home at last, she muttered sleepily.
So
she must admit that she'd been wrong.
Ryko's enjoyed her camp after all.
She'd made new friends and shared stories around the campfire. It had brought the normally shy Ryko even more out of her shell. There were no bad vibes about what happened the previous year. Everyone was open and honest about it. She remembered the day that she'd arrived,
yes, this bit, the newspaper clipping, is something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. Obviously, this ties into the very end.
Teen killer held at Wolf Asylum, the bold
and this took me about. I wrote the first draft of the story, and at the end of it, I had Ryko giving up Laurie, saying, "Oh no, she's at Wolf Asylum." And I thought, I don't like that, because Ryko, she's had a rough day. We don't want her to sort of like give up Laurie. So. And I sort of spent ages thinking about it. How can we get Hans to Wolf Asylum without Ryko telling him? And I came up with the newspaper clipping. It falls out of her pocket at the end. So we had to come back and rewrite the first bit, so slamming the newspaper clipping. Well, explain this. That's why she's got the newspaper clipping in her pocket at the end of it. So we had to sort of put that. And I've just talked over the Cape Fear style arrival of Hans, which is, and I think with this one I'd trying to put a little bit more references to other films in there. So that was Cape Fear obviously dropping off the bottom of the bus.
Some were quietly
And the
watching
introductions
TV
again,
doing
when I'm
chores around
writing
the
this, I don't
house.
know who these
Some
guys are at the
returning home
time. They're
from
just
day
there,
out.
and as I'm
Susan
writing,
Nelson
I'm
was
sort of thinking,
tidying,
what are these
and
guys
Ryko's
doing
boyfriend
there?
Donnie was deciding
And
whether
I
to text
sort
Ryko
of
again
copied
or
the
just wait for
introduction
her to
from
come over
Maple
like
Lane,
she'd
as in
written.
sort of introducing the characters and
Ryko and
placing them
Donnie
on the
made an
board
odd
as we do.
couple. Him a
Not
gangly
all of them
6 foot
appear,
tall
so some of them
against
just
Ryko's
sort of
5
appear at
foot 2
once.
athletic frame. There was no doubting his
And
devotion to
we
her,
don't get a lot of
although
backstory for
Ryko
any
did
of
think he
them
could be a
at
little
all,
clingy at times.
which is something that came up in
Ryko's
a
Master
later
Jenkinson kids
sort
playing
of
ball in the
conversation about the
streets. She bikes
stories.
over to the Smallways
Are
with
the
her little cruiser Lyko.
the victims are so
Getting
disposable?
dark,
Do we
kids.
care about
Time
them?
to think about heading
No,
home.
no,
she
it's
thought.
something to
She
think
has.
about. Something
Sure
to think
thing,
about.
Ryko. Billy replied.
This
Just
is
10
my
more minutes.
dreadful American accent,
Ryko arrived at the Smallways house
which
to feed the
I'm not
cats.
sure.
A good deed while they were away on
The main problem I
vacation.
have with my American accent
She
in
was
this
just
one is
finishing up
it's
putting the empty
pretty
tins of cat
much
food into the trash when she glanced out the window
nondescript.
towards
I
the
did a little bit of
intersection.
American accent for the
Something
more
caught her eye.
recent one,
Focusing,
which I
she
think is
stared
better.
for a
You better
minute.
judge for
Huge
yourselves,
figure
but this is
emerged from
just
the
sort
bushes.
of.
Holy shit, Ryko said aloud, quickly stepping
And
back.
we're already straight off, and I think this is a lot of the problem with the
Daylight
film.
was
Is
fading quickly
the
as
film,
Hans stepped out
the
of
story is
intersection,
the
breathing
pacing's
heavily through
wrong.
his rusty pig-head
So we
iron
start
mouth as he
off.
looked up and down Maple Lane.
Ryko's at the
The
Smalleys.
others were unaware.
Hans has
No
appeared
one
right
seen
in the
him.
middle of the map,
He
difficult
lifted the massive
to
sledgehammer
write.
and rested it over his shoulder.
And when I was playing the
He would
game,
find the girl who would
I
lead
was
him
like
to
really
Ryko.
excited.
But
I was
first he
sort of
must
like, this is
punish
going to
her.
make a great
He
story
must
because we
be
start off, and we've got Ryko there.
Ryko was already heading for the
There's
door
the
when
bike
her phone
outside,
rang.
and the
She
opening
looked down at
scene
it.
is just
A message
like
from Donnie.
when I played that, I thought
Hey,
this is going to
babe,
be
where
a
are
great
you?
story. Look at this,
She
as she
tapped the
runs out
reply,
onto
she
the
ran to
bike,
his
and
voice.
I do like
He's
this
here,
bit.
in the street. He's just standing
He's
there.
just standing
Stay
there.
inside. I'm
Is
going
that
to
a
get
tarot
help.
card, possibly?
What's going on over there? Came the reply. Ryko didn't answer it. That
So
thing
we're
was heading
already
straight for the Jenkins.
it's fast-paced already. Hans
Full
is on his
speed,
way
she
to kill
vaulted
the
the white
kids.
picket
We
fence
know
in
that
the
they're not going to
Smallways
die.
front yard, swooping down and picking up
And she
lightning,
swoops
darting
round on the
furiously
bike.
towards the intersection, her
And
bar screens flapping in the wind. What the hell am I doing? She thought to herself. It was now almost dark. Little Billy Jenkinson turned to pick up the baseball as his sister had tossed him. It's time to get home now.
I mean,
As
this
he
is
turned to look for the
this
ball, his eyes
move
met the sight
from a
of the
gameplay. I
massive
deserve to win the game from
He
this
slowly looked
from
up
this
to see
move.
the full
Come
size
round
of the
on
massive
bike,
man standing
get
there.
victims.
Billy's jaw dropped slowly as Hans
Ryko's the
lifted his
hero
hammer,
already.
readying for the swing.
I know she dies, but
At that very moment, Ryko flew round the corner on lightning.
and I think this is good.
Skidding on the
This is
road
a good
and
scene.
slamming into Hans's
Good
leg.
imagery.
Hans staggered backwards slightly. Off balance, he unleashed a swift horizontal swing of his hammer.
And my initial thought
The
of
hammer
this
rushed over the
is,
head of Ryko as she
you're in the middle of a
slid to the right,
residential neighbourhood.
leaping
Why
off,
isn't anyone calling the
flabbergasted-looking Billy.
police?
Missing Ryko by inches,
So we
the
have to
powerful
take
swing
out the
connected with
phones.
a transformer attached to the utility
And
pole.
He
It
does so by
exploded
taking out a
out
transformer on a
sparks and
lamppost,
causing Hans to bellow and
telegraph
roar
post.
under his mask and retreat backwards.
Takes out that. I'm
Maple
not sure if
Lane
that's
plunged into darkness.
accurate that would happen, but it gives me a
Not
sort of
missing a stride,
opportunity.
Ryko scooped
This is why,
Billy up
again,
by the hood
when
of
you're
his
sort of
coat,
writing
carrying
these
him
things,
towards
when
his left,
you're sort of playing the
placing
game and
him
you're
down next to his sister.
getting the story, but when you're writing it, you
Putting
sort of
herself
really have to go
in
into the
between the
details.
monster
Sort of
and
like,
the
yeah,
Go!
the first problem
Billy
is
and
why
Judy
isn't anyone
needed to
calling the
talk
police?
twice.
Well,
They
let's make
grabbed
it
their bikes and
make
pedaled
sure they
furiously
can't.
towards home. Ryko turned, ready.
And then we've got a little bit of.
confrontation.
Obviously,
Hans
the
stood,
tarot card then takes
shocked
him
by
away
the
from
speed of
Ryko,
events.
and we've got to sort of
Transformer
like
blazed in the background, casting
introduce
a
the
dancing shadow
the
across
fear
the
of fire almost for
He
Hans,
stepped
which
back
is
away
something I
from
come
the
back
fire,
to
aware of the
later
figure
on.
in
It's a
front of him, but
typical sort of
hesitant to
trope of
press the flames.
bad guy
Noise
villains,
behind him
isn't it?
made him turn.
I think
Fresh blood, thought
he
to
won't
himself,
pass the
he
fire
strode west down
because he's
Maple
scared of
Lane.
it. And then we get Martha and Jed,
Jackson
and this
were
is
sitting
another
down to watch
element
their
I
favourite
like
game
of
show
this,
when the power went out.
is these guys.
Darn, Martha, did you hear that? That's the main
Told the
transformer.
Darren Residents
I told the
Association.
Darn Residents Association
Yeah,
that thing was on its last legs.
you can just imagine this sort of
Phones are out
crotchety
too,
old
honey,
couple.
Martha called
And
back.
these were actually
Jed
just
grabbed
put
a candle
in
from under the
because
thing,
I
lifted
wanted
the
to get
look
the
out the
tarot
window
cards in,
and
and I had
Martha,
it was very
lock the
difficult to
doors,
write the
said
exact tarot
Ryko,
cards in. So
blowing out the candle.
these two guys, Martha and Jed,
Ryko stood
are just
square
a
in the
device
street,
really
clenched.
to
Her eyes slowly adjusted
allow
to the
me to
darkness
use the
and
names of the tarot
transformed
cards.
against the light. She
But
stared down the dimming
really
lights
work.
of Maple
I
Lane,
think they're
saw the
great,
massive bulk of hands turn and
and
walk over to
they
the
become
direction.
sort of like the
She
semi-stars of
relaxed
the show
slightly
in
and
my
grabbed her
eyes.
cell phone from her pocket. Damn, no signal. She knew she needed to get help, but if this thing came back for her, she wouldn't have a chance. Petersons. She needed a weapon. She racked her
The
brain.
Petersons.
Petersons, she thought.
And I
She
think
knew
what
the
I'm doing
Petersons kept a
story-wise
hunting
is
knife
I'm
displayed on
almost
their mantelpiece, but
I'm
she knew they
almost
hid their
trying
stone
to
door key
take
under the
things
mat.
too far. I mean, I've got some
She
notes
quietly
here
slipped into the shadows
as
of the
well.
Petersons'
I
yard,
thought it jumps
retrieved the
about too
key,
much,
and crept
and
into
I
the
had to put in
house.
the glowing
Even in the
characters
darkness,
because
she knew where to find the knife.
it sort of
Grabbing
like
it quickly and
skipped
heading
about so
back
much
towards the street.
story-wise because I was doing it turn by turn again. That's something that
Michael
I,
Wilson and his wife Jenny were returning home from a
you
beautiful
know,
day
so we've
out
gone
on the
from
local park
Ryko's
playground
one turn,
in
obviously,
Maple
then to
Lane.
Hans's turn, and
Yeah, well,
he'll
that's what
go
you would
forward and
think, isn't
kill
it? Michael shouted back to his wife.
one of these guys. Then we'll jump back to
Well,
Ryko.
screw
Then
you,
we'll jump
Michael
back to Hans
Wilson,
and he kills the
Jenny
other one.
yelled
Then
back
we'll
at
jump back to
Now
Ryko.
look here, Jenny.
And
Michael started to
something
say,
that I tried to do
turning
less
back
and less
towards
of the
wife.
more I
He
got
abruptly
on with
stopped as
writing.
his
I thought
staggering body walked
it
straight
it
into the brick wall which was Ham.
it just jumps
Michael
too
turned
much. The
unsteadily.
pacing is wrong.
Hey,
You
buddy,
can't
watch where
pace
you're.
it very well
Michael
because you're
swerved,
just
his
flitting
hand
from one thing
pressing
to the
down
other.
the skull
Then I had to put the
wife's
glowing
leg.
characters in, so
His fingers digging
because for
into
me
the
I didn't,
temples on either side
even
of
I
his
didn't know
forehead.
what was going on where. I mean, we've
Michael
got
had a moment
all
of
these
clarity,
people
his
that I'm
hands lifted
naming,
the mossy floor
and
squeezed
there
his
just didn't
sheathed
seem any
hand, crushing
coherency
Michael's
to
skull
it.
like it were walnut in the
It,
jaws of a
it just
nutcracker.
became
The sound was sickening as fragments of the bone
it just
penetrated the brain,
almost
filling almost
became an
immediately.
exercise in
Jenny
writing
Wilson let out a
little
high-pitched scream as hands
parts
dropped Michael's
than
wrist.
it did an overall
More fresh blood,
story,
he
if that
growled,
makes any
lifting
sense. Well,
his
that's the
sledgehammer
impression I
and
get from it.
advancing towards the
So
hysterically Jenny.
I thought it jumped too much, it was too fast, yeah. The boyfriend was written awfully, we'll
Ryko
come
left
to him
the
in a minute.
Peterson's yard. She urgently
And it
needed
was
to get
too
help.
complicated.
Glancing
It
across
was
the
just,
street,
like I
she
say,
saw the
too
glow of the
much
lamps reflected
going
through the
on.
window.
Trying to be too
Hearing the
clever, I
yelling in
think,
the
is
distance,
probably
she
what
hurried
I'm
across the road to the
what I'm trying to get
Nelson
at.
Drive.
So then we're back to
The
Ryko
darkness,
again,
combined
and
with
she's
her
now,
haste, led to her kicking up a rock, smashing the
and
headlights
again,
of
this
Nelson's
scene
brand
is
new
over
SUV.
the top. So she
The
walks in,
sound
she
echoed
smashes
down
the
the road. She
headlights
froze,
of the SUV,
waiting.
which
Nothing. She hurried up
relates
the
to
path
something
and
that's
wrapped
coming
around
in about
Nelson.
2 or 3 minutes' time. And I had to go back and backtrack
Susan
and
Nelson
write
were
all
busy
that
packing
in
away the
to get the
fireworks
terror
prepared for
card
the
in,
Thanksgiving
which was the hit by a
celebration when the
car.
power had gone out.
And it
She
all
took
became
her
a bit
role as
Final
head of Maple
Destination,
Lane
and that
event
sort of
committee very seriously. and might
obsessed
get
on
the
that a
supplies
little bit
early.
too much.
She'd
I
found her
think.
battery
I
lamp
think
and
don't
was
think
just
that
about
was
to sit
subtle
down
enough.
for
I
the
think that
evening
was
when
sort of
she heard
like
the rap at the door.
almost like
Picking up the lamp,
let's
she
try
walked
and
down
make
the
it as
hallway
clever as
closed
we
the
can. And I
door
know.
to a fearful-looking
And
Ryko.
if you listen to what
Riku,
happens
honey,
is she
you
leaves
look terrible. What's going on?
the
I
house.
need to use your
She
phone,
can't
Mrs.
see
M.
because
Is
of
that
the
okay?
smashed headlights. So I go
Sure
back and
thing,
light the
honey.
smashed
Come on
headlight,
in.
and it's just a
She's
bit
there
over
in
the
the
top.
hallway. Ryko
Hey,
lifted the
Rachel.
receiver. The line was dead. Panicking, Ryko turned to Mr.
The
Nelson.
line's dead.
The line's dead, she stated. Well, the power's out. Guess that's the problem. You sure you're okay, honey? Look,
You're
Mrs.
crazy,
M,
Ryko.
you're going to think I'm crazy, Ryko started. The camp I
And
went
again,
to, the girl who they think killed all those
we're
people,
just trying to sort of
she
like.
didn't. He's here.
I'm
the
not sure
real
the
killer.
dialogue's any
We
good.
need help.
The
Susan looked at
dialogue is
Ryko
very
carefully.
rushed. There's
She
quite a
could see the
lot.
girl
I
was
write with a
clearly
lot of
very
dialogue. I
distressed.
think. I don't know. This
Well,
is
honey, the power's out.
not a
the phones
conscious
are out.
decision too.
Guess it's going to be like that
But
all over town.
there's a lot
Maybe
of
the sheriff's office in Cedar Grove will tell.
dialogue for the
I could
sake of
drive there if it
dialogue
makes
in
you feel
this.
any
I don't
better.
know. I might be
Would
being a
you?
little bit
That's
too
great.
harsh on it.
Please,
Because, like I say,
get
there are
help.
some
I've
there
got to
are
get
some
to
good elements.
Okay,
in it.
honey, I'll go. You take care. I'll get help.
So obviously Ryko's
Great.
rescuing her,
Thanks.
just sort of taking
Hey,
her to the exit, but
mind if I borrow
we've
some of these fireworks?
made it into
I'll
her
replace
driving
them.
off so we
Ryko
can get
asked
the
as
next
they
terror
headed
card in.
Well, sure thing.
I don't
Thanks.
know. And I
Ryko grabbed the
I
box
think
of
this is.
fireworks as they headed out of the house.
Don't
Susan
think I
Nelson
need
got
the
into
terror
her car
cards
as
in.
Ryko
Not all
headed
of them.
back out onto the street.
Something that I've learned a little bit more.
Susan started up the engine.
Oh yeah, shoot the
Ah,
headlight.
shoot,
bulbs.
the headlight bulb's
Damn.
out, she cursed herself as she pulled out of the drive. And this thing is brand new. Ryko was heading back towards the intersection to grab Lightning as Susan passed her in the white SUV. If she could get to Donny's,
No,
maybe
don't go
he
to
had
Donny's.
cell
I mean, this
signal.
is why you lost,
Maybe they could call
essentially,
for
because
help
you went to
before
Donny's.
Susan reached Cedar Grove. She inspected the box of fireworks. Great, it had a timer. This might just work.
There's a lot of good
Carefully
elements in
placing
this
the
story. The
fireworks in the road, she
fireworks
set
should
the
have
timer.
worked.
This could prove a good distraction.
You
Buying
know,
the time for them.
I think there's a
She
lot of
picked
good
Lightning up from the road
elements
and
in
headed
the
towards
game.
Donny's house.
The story just didn't
Ava
come
Jones
off
couldn't believe the last few
cohesively.
days.
And again,
It all
this is the
started one
final
morning when she
destination
woke
bit. So
up.
Ava
She was about
Jones,
to
or
leave the house
whoever it
when a
is,
red
Yellow
Ford Beamer
Meeple,
came over.
who's just glowed up,
Strong sense of impending
died
doom.
from the terror card.
She
She's hit
delayed
by
her
a
journey
car.
that morning,
So we're
missing
sort of
the
thinking,
derailment of the 7:15
well,
train.
why?
Quite a stroke of
How do
luck.
I get that in?
Since then,
And it just
things have
became a
gone
very
down. Free
convoluted.
coffee at
So I
the
like the
local
idea
diner,
of it, but I'm
plus
just
home
don't.
stopping to wait for her.
I just don't think it
Even
was
several
necessary,
competition
really,
from an online
possibly.
community.
Maybe.
She had a good feeling about the lotto
Maybe
scratch
was.
card she just bought. This could be exactly what she was waiting
Just
for.
a little bit over the
She
top.
started scratching off the foil as she strode towards home. Bag of
Bag of
dollars.
dollars.
Bag of dollars. Come on, this is it. Susan Nelson turned
Yeah,
around.
so
to
she's
look at the
rubbernecking
smouldering
at the transformer that's on
as she
fire
turned
from
left
about
at the
5 minutes
intersection
ago.
south towards Cedar Grove.
Well, 10 minutes ago now.
The broken headlight meant that she didn't didn't see Ava crossing the road. Although
Hits
she only
Ava.
clipped Ava lightly, it was enough to send her reeling
All
backwards
this,
off balance.
all that
She turned
sort
around
of 2 or 3 minutes
her head
of
hitting the sidewalk with a
exposition
cracking
just to
sound,
get
clear fluid
been hit
seeping
by a
from the
car in
nose.
there.
Gabriel Flores was heading home from his day when a white SUV passed him at speed. Looking up, he saw Ava's body lying on the floor.
Help!
He looked around.
And that's
Help!
awful
He shouted.
dialogue,
They've
and
been
that's
hit by a
awfully
car.
delivered from my
The wind
narration.
blew down Maple Lane. As Ryko whooshed towards Donny's house,
So
on the
we
right,
just had
Jenny
her
walked
husband
back and
being
back,
killed. We
tripping
should have killed
before
those both in
his
one
hands advanced towards
piece of
her.
dialogue, I think.
Blood from Michael's skull darkening the wood of the handle of his sledgehammer would drip from his hands.
And I
Putting
think
up
we
her
flick
arms,
back
Cavern
again
Bate
after
did not
this.
stop the swipe from the massive sledgehammer. The end was mercifully swift for Jenny as the hammer split the air with a dull swoosh, connecting to the side of her head with a thud, shattering her cheekbones to pieces and dislodging her eyeball,
Squelch.
which fell to the floor with a dull squelch.
No sound effects on this one either.
The lifeless body
This was the
slumbered
first one I did
slowly
with
back.
music. I came back and redid the Happy
Taking the
Trails
large
one,
butcher's
but
knife from his belt, Hans bent down and started to carve.
I haven't got as far as sound effects
Jenny,
yet.
as her body still twitched in the last
We have got the
thread of
bloodless
death.
tracker.
He
I'm
placed
not
the
sure that
stakes
adds
into the
anything or
pockets of
not.
his
Probably,
butcher's
maybe.
apron. With the meticulous task finished, he carefully cleaned the knife on his apron and placed it back in its holster. Then he turned towards the Clark house. Jed Jackson
And
peeked
literally
from his
Jed
window onto
again.
the street.
I
He'd
like
witnessed the
these two.
terrifying death of the Wilsons. Martha, you sure the doors are locked? This son of a
And
bitch
again,
just keeps
literally
coming.
just to get the tarot card in.
Gerald Clark had lived on Maple
But,
Lane for about 30 years now.
Adds a
Always
bit of
used to be
comic
such a
relief
nice
as well. I
place
really
to
like
live,
this. And this
quiet
this
life.
is my
That's the way he
favourite
liked
kill
it.
I think I
That was until
wrote.
those
And it's
damn Wilsons
very
moved into the neighbourhood. Always
elegant.
fighting and screaming. He just
I
changed into his
really
robe
like
and
this
settling
kill.
down for the evening.
You can just imagine him. He's sitting there.
Here they
he's-
were
oh my
again,
God, the
carrying
damn
on on the
Wilsons!
street,
I'm going to
no
go
doubt
teach
drunk
them.
again.
So
Well,
it
Gerald
stomps
Clark
down
had
his
had enough.
hallway,
I'm
opens
gonna
his
give that
door,
son
and
bitch
like,
a
oh
piece of my
shit.
mind, he thought.
There we
He
go.
grabbed his lamp and stomped towards his front door, flinging it open. As the door swiftly swung open, he wasn't quite prepared for the sight that stood before him. The light from Gerald's lamp cast an eerie glow onto the massive bulk of Hans' 7-foot-tall frame.
You weren't expecting that when you opened the door, were you, Jerry
Husky
boy?
iron mask, amplifying the sound of the grunting breaths. Gerald looked inquisitively as Hans rested.
So like
his
Hans
sight
is just
on
sort of like
the gold rim
nonchalantly
slowly
just sort of
unsheathing
standing there.
the
He's
knife.
the image I have in my
Straight
head.
metal
He's standing in front of him, going, "Whoa!" Like what's going on?
Flesh beneath
Hans has
Gerald's
got so
skin,
much time. He
the
just
massive blade
puts his
penetrating
sledgehammer down,
Gerald's nasal
slowly
cavity.
unsheathes his knife and
Gerald's eyes widened as the knife bit.
wipe
His
it
last
off.
sight was the burning red eyes of
Turn
Hans
around,
beneath
and off you go.
his mask. Hans slowly
Job done.
withdrew the knife, again meticulously cleaning the blade.
I really like the imagery of that kill. It's so simple. Here we go, Jed.
Jed was glued to his window. Martha, Martha, he's coming out of Jerry Wilson's. He came right through
You
the
get
yard.
away from that window.
Jedediah Jackson, you get away from that window this minute.
Sorry. I do like those two guys.
Ryko screeched to a halt.
And then we get
at the door
Donnie.
junction to Maple Lane.
And we get these two.
Javier and Adriano returned
It
to
becomes
the
very
side. Oh, hey,
difficult
Ryko.
to
Acknowledged
save
Adriano.
victims when
Just
you're
out
sort
for
of
a
like,
stroll. No
you know,
power.
you've got
Thought
to have a
we'd get some
reason
fresh air.
story-wise or
Listen, you guys, get
to,
home.
to get
Lock
them
the
out of
door.
there, or
Ryko
you feel
ordered.
as though you do. I'm not sure if you do, but
Javier looked
and I think this is it.
suspicious
Is
at
it
Ryko.
there's a
Slightly
lot
taken
of
aback by
this
her abruptness.
things that I
Noticed
like
the knife
in
into
this,
her
but there's a
belt.
lot that I don't
Backing away, he
like, and I
muttered,
think
"Well, yeah,
that's
it's getting
why
late. We'd better
I'm
get
not too
back."
keen on it.
The
I
couple
keep saying I'm
turned
not keen on it. It's not
hurriedly
bad.
to head north
It's
away
not
from
bad.
Maple Lane.
Donnie is awful.
Just as the pair were heading out of view, Donnie burst from the front door of his house. "Ryko!" he shouted excitedly. "What the hell's going on? Didn't answer my text, now my cell signal's out, the power's down.
Babe.
You okay, babe?" Ryko grabbed Donnie's upper arms, gripping tightly as she looked him square in the eyes. "Donnie, listen," she started.
Listen
At the
while I
camp,
explain
Laurie
to you what's
Carpenter,
going on.
The girl they thought killed all the other counsellors. "Yeah,
And
babe,
again, I think
remember. She told me
gameplay-wise,
the
I was
story.
unlucky to lose this.
Listen,
I mean, it actually worked
It
quite
wasn't
well.
her, the killer,
But you
the
know,
masked man,
fireworks
Hans.
down,
He's
out
here.
there.
He nearly killed
Shouldn't
him
have
with the
got him
Jacobs.
because
He
he
nearly killed me.
saps my time
Wow,
gameplay-wise.
Okay, babe, what do we do? I sent Susan Nelson.
And
to
the other
his
thing
help.
that happened is
We've
Hans
gotta
got a
try and
minor
stop
dark
him.
power just as he
He'll
got to
kill
that
everyone.
intersection and I attacked him, so I
Took his
didn't
knife
take his
from
health
the
down
pizza,
far enough.
she
Then he
said,
got
grabbing
feed,
the knife from her belt.
and then I
Laurie
failed
Carpenter almost
practically
killed
every
him.
roll
He
after
can
that.
be
So,
stopped. I'm fast.
you know,
I
the
am.
gods of
I have a
fate
way
were
to distract
deciding
him.
Ryko wasn't
Ryko
going to
looked at
make
her
it.
watch. The show should be starting just about.
And we're almost into the end game. And how long we've been going?
The first firework boomed.
Nice
and
effects
lit
on the
sky.
video.
Hans looked down the street.
We've been going
confused,
15
somehow
minutes, and we've
delighted.
still sort of got 7 or 8 minutes left. But everything just seems to happen so quick.
The one that
Happy
would lead him to
Trails
Laurie. This was her.
sort
Strode
of seemed
purposely
like a
back
nice
towards the
pace. It was a
intersection.
similar length of time for the
He just
story.
keeps coming, Martha.
It just seemed like a nice pace. With this, it just
Where's
seemed
the
like
darn neighborhood watch when you
fits and starts. And
Ryko
this-
slunk
this-
through the shadows towards the intersection.
this should have been a nice
Donnie
scene. I
followed
think,
behind.
you know,
She stopped.
I've
and
got
held her
this in my
breath as
head
she
of,
caught the sight
you know,
Hans heading
her
towards the
ambushing
fireworks
him.
plan. Pushing
I think
Donnie
that
back
sort
into
of
the
comes
shadows, she
across.
gripped the knife in her hand. This would require cracking
Apart from
neck tight.
Donnie ruining it with
She put
his
her finger to her lips,
dialogue.
motioning Donnie to be quiet. darted
So
into
she
the shadows
zips
with
across,
Hans.
has a quick
Slipping
attack.
low behind the monster, she
and
raked
moves
the
to the
knife
other
across
side.
the back of Hans' knees.
I think she's
Blood
using her
spurted
special
out across the
ability here,
street.
gameplay-wise.
Hans bellowed and turned, swinging his
Unholy
massive hammer
Speed
with
was the
unholy
dark
speed.
power he
But
just
Ryko was
pulled.
gone. The hammer swung wildly with no target. Slipping again from the shadows, Ryko leapt at Hans from behind, raining down a furious strike of blows with the knife into Hans' shoulders. Again he bellowed, reaching round and swatting Ryko away with his massive Rathgar. Ryko landed with a thud on the roll. rolled to the left and sprang to her feet. As Hans turned,
Yeah, you
Ryko
see, I
slipped
quite like
backwards
that.
into
I
the
quite
shadow,
like that.
tripping on a piece of
Maybe that
sledge
could have been a
powder.
bit longer
Her ankle
written.
cracked. She stumbled
I don't
backwards
know.
into the darkness on the other side.
We had the sort of like reference to Big Trouble in Little China. It
Fleeting
required
and
crackerjack
weakened, Hans
timing.
staggered away from
I
the
quite like putting a
intersection.
little reference to
The pain of
first
the
time,
attack
obviously
brought
only
on
the
his
second story I
hunger.
wrote, but I think it's the first time I put a
Light
direct
of the
reference to a film in there.
Red clouded his
I quite
eyes.
like it. I
He
did a
must
couple
eat.
of
He must have his
quotes
dark
in
feast.
Wolf Asylum, which when
Pausing
we
to
get
crouch
to
in the
that,
shadows, he brought
you'll
out
see.
strips of flesh from his
But this
paper.
is,
As Donnie quietly slipped across the intersection, he could hear the wet munching sounds from beneath Hans's iron mass. Reaching
and
the
I
south side
think,
of the intersection, Donnie rushed over to Ryko.
I think the
Babe, your
dialogue
ankle,
of this
he
guy
cried.
is just terrible. It's
Fine,
just
Ryko
lazy.
replied. I hurt him. Did you see? Yeah, you got him good. Stay here. He's hunched over there, distracted. I'm going to finish this. With that, Ryko was gone, limping towards the kneeling figure of Hans, adrenaline coursing through her body. Hans
So this
sensed
is
her
almost the
approaching,
final fight.
stood to his full height and turned towards the approaching shadow.
You know, there's more action here
Almost
than there was in the
instantaneously,
final
with a
fight.
thunderous swing, he brought the hammer over his head, swooping down towards Ryko. Ryko was quick enough to dodge the swing, retaliating with a swift swipe into Hans' abdomen, so powerful it penetrated the thick apron, causing a large gassing wound across the monster's stomach, before falling backwards. Hans reached down and felt the wound. The sleeping blood stained his hand dark red in the dim light. He looked up and advanced towards the silhouette of Ryko.
And then boom!
The hammer
See, that's a
raised.
nice
Again, a
cinematic
massive
moment. I
flash from
think
one of the
he's
fireworks
just
that
about
lit
to
the
go
fire.
for Ryko,
The
and
sound
then
boomed
obviously
around Maple Lane.
he's then going for
Getting
the
his dagger,
fireworks.
Hans turned and staggered towards the source of the sound as Ryko slumped back against
So I think
the
I got
white
most of
fence
what happened in the
chasing
game into the story. It's just that
Donnie dashed out to the prostrate Ryko, lying against the fence and cradled her in his arms.
there are
Babe,
elements
oh,
that
babe,
drag the story
you
down.
okay?
He's one of them.
Yeah,
Donnie
I'm good.
should have just dumped him.
In the distance, the booming of the fireworks.
But I wanted to take Donnie along
Jedediah
personally.
turned to his wife,
I think
short.
mainly because of Stephen.
Martha,
The first one was
that
a bad
Brothers girl's just attacked them.
was a bad
What's happening now? Asked Martha.
boyfriend.
Not sure. It's all gone quiet.
So I wanted Donnie
Yeah,
to
it's
sort of
too
like
quiet,
redeem
if you ask me,
boyfriends across
Martha
the
replied.
across the final girl world.
Hans reached the fireworks
And,
as the last one shot and boomed in the sky. Bending down,
Also
he
gave
grabbed
me
the spent bolt in
that
his
second
right hand,
viewpoint to write. So
crushing
it's a
the
lot
bolt,
easier if
screaming
you're
in
sort
rage
of.
as
I
he
find it
realised
easier if you're certainly
The
doing
girl.
dialogue. You've got a
The
second
girl was the ghost
point
who had
to
attacked
bounce
him.
dialogue off.
He would again deliver the death blow and feed
But
her. But first she would tell him where
didn't use
Laurie
him very
was.
well. I don't think.
Enraged, he turned
So we now
and
come
headed
into the
back
final
towards the
fight.
intersection. Donnie saw
And
the
poor
massive
old
figure
Donnie,
emerging from the darkness.
at least he dies a quick death.
Ryko got
And he
slowly
does,
to
you
her
know, he
feet
does
as Donnie
get
pushed
in
her
there,
behind
Donnie.
him.
Redeeming the
Donnie stood
boyfriends.
squarely
I'll
at the
get that
main
big,
intersection
massive,
of the
huge
road.
bloke with the pig
All
mask
fear of him
splat.
in him gone, as he felt the overwhelming urge to protect Ryko from this monster. Donnie ran at Hans, howling like a banshee.
Mercifully quick.
The end was mercifully quick, as Hans simply swiped across with his massive right arm, swatting Donnie like a fly and sending him crashing into the curb, his neck snapping like a dry twig. The second blow came from a sledgehammer, this time down towards Ryko. She lifted her arm to block it. The god deflected the main power of the blow, but it shattered her forearm to pieces. Screaming in pain, she staggered backwards and fell to the floor.
Flirred blow. And
Third
again,
blow
I
came at her
didn't
again. She managed to roll to
edit
the side as
this
the blow
as
deflected
much
off her
as I
shoulder.
do now,
Mighty
so a
Wolf
lot of
hammer
this was
thudding
just
against the asphalt
spoken
on the street.
in
Hans
paragraphs
roared and lifted the
and
hammer above his head
redone
with
until I
both hands.
didn't make any mistakes. So you get the odd bit,
Running on pure
odd bit
adrenaline,
of dialogue
Ryko
slip.
tried to get to her feet, but her ankle gave way. Improvising, she rolled left and let out a furious strike with the knife towards Hans.
As she rolled,
But as
she obviously
rolled,
failed
shattered
her
pieces of
furious
junction
strike or
box
critical
fell
blow or
into
whatever
her
it was,
spine, severed
and
her nerve,
died.
causing the knife to limply drop from her hand. Hans looked down at Ryko curiously,
And
reached
again,
out, grabbing her by the throat.
mentioned this before,
He
really
lifted her to eye
liked
level
the
and
fact
squeezed,
that I
very
came up with the
gently.
idea that she
Laurie,
drops the newspaper
where?
clipping.
The distorted voice growled from
And that took me
within
that took me a
Ryko stared
week, and I
into
was
the red
just
eyes,
about
with
to
the light
record it
fading quickly.
without that in there.
Hans squeezed a little
And I
harder.
thought, oh, what about if we do that?
Where?
I'm quite pleased with that. I
Growled.
really like that.
Fuck you, Ryko choked,
Fuck you.
using her last ounce of strength to split the blood from her mouth into Hans's terrifying iron mask. Hans squeezed again. As
Now the
last of
ending
life drained from
is what
Ryko, she dropped her lifeless
what really
body.
makes this story.
As Ryko hit the floor, Hans cocked his head to the side and looked down curiously. He slowly bent down to retrieve the newspaper clipping that had fallen from Ryko's pocket.
There you go, Team Killer.
held
I
the
mean,
Wolf Asylum.
I'm guessing
Hans
Ryko should have
roared
washed her
under his
pants
mask
in
before
between
turning and striding north from Maple Lane.
going to Camp Happy Trails and
Oh,
going
Jesus,
babysitting
Martha,
at this morning,
he's just
or
killed
cat
her.
sitting or whatever she
And
was
the
up to.
boy, Jed stammered.
But she didn't, and
It was
the
4 a.m.
newspaper
when Detective
clipping
Lucinda
is
Cobb received a
intact.
call from the sheriff's office at Cedar Creek.
Oh, and we've got to
Yes,
bring
she was
Detective
familiar
Cobb
with the
back.
Carpenter's case. They had assured us
who's
they
been
could still have
promoted
seen
and is now female.
thoughts race through her
Not
head
that she
during
was
the
male,
climb
she was
down
nothing in
ride
the
to
first one.
Maple Lane. There was always something that didn't fit with the Carpenter case, and now this.
Yeah, the feds.
The feds would have to be called,
I'm sure
but
they
she
get
damn well
called.
make sure that this was her case.
Probably
Wall Street
Mulder and
she had
Scully,
to
I
be.
would think, after
As
this.
she pulled into Maple Lane, she saw an officer questioning an elderly couple on the front porch. Yes, sir,
Might a
saw
big
it all,
fellow
we
with
did.
a sledgehammer
Might a
and
big
a
fellow
big
with a
mask.
sledgehammer and a metal pig mask. Goes
Dread,
all
yeah,
kinds
I
of hell
say,
here.
check
Wind
my
blew
American
the
accent
yellowing
on the
leaves
bird
round her
story.
sore
Much
cold
better,
feet.
I think.
She looked down and reached for the newspaper clipping that caught on her shoe.
And here we go.
Hans
And
emerged from
this,
the woods
I
by the
think,
side
I
of the
literally
I-91
decided
road.
as I was writing
He
it.
reached
I
out
thought,
his mind.
sister.
God.
I thought it needed
That
something at
side
the
of Laurie
end,
sat upright at the start.
and I was like, oh, what a bit. And it felt a little bit. And there we go. It is finished. It felt a little bit, I don't know, Empire Strike Backsy, as obviously it ended on a downer. Raiko died, and then obviously at the end of Empire you get the sort of like, I am your father. And I don't think I was consciously going for that, but as I wrote it I thought, ooh, hang on a minute, what if we make Hans Laurie's sister, and that goes some way to explain what happened with the telepathic connection in the first one, and certainly sets up Wolf Asylum. So again, that was just something that came out of it. So yeah, so overall, I'm just going to go through the notes I made now quickly, and said I like the intro and Hans arriving. I did. Can't beat a bit of Cape Fear. Background music works okay. Was it a bit quiet? Not sure. I like their introductions. Characters appearing. Yes. Accents! Exclamation mark. No, that's fair enough. Good start to the story. Is it too fast? I think so. I like the bit taking out the power. Yep. I love Martha and Jed. Mentioned that. The break between the Wilson kills doesn't work. I think I mentioned that as well. Susan Nelson and the whole getting hit by a car terror card is too convoluted. Yeah, I think that's true. Too much or not enough on each character. So yeah, I think that's probably a fair enough point. I've sort of made notes here. We either need sort of like, the characters either just need to be disposable. If we're just going to kill them literally 2 seconds after introducing them, why not? Why introduce them at all? Don't know. Something to think about. And what I've said is, when I did Wolf Asylum, when we come to do the wolf horror one, all the kills were from Hans's point of view. You followed Hans round the asylum in a streak, and I think that worked well. And the last fight felt like an anticlimax. Well, yeah, that's fair enough. And what I've got is also just got a little bit of feedback written down from people, and from Celeste on the forum, the Discord. Story arc is about Hans and Laurie. Yeah, she kind of has to die. Sorry, Raiko, but Celeste's right. It did work better with Raiko dying. And Celeste's eyes widened when she read sister at the end. Yeah, no good. That's what I was going for. I mean, this is why I love the feedback from people, because if I'm sort of writing that in and going, oh yeah, I think this is going to be really shocking, or really sort of like, and if people come back and give me a bit of say, yeah, wow, I found that really really shocking, or surprised at that's great, because that for me just sort of says like that's what I was aiming for, and somebody's telling me that that's how they felt. It's great as a writer, having written it, to get the reaction that I was hoping for. And if it doesn't work, people come back and say, look, I didn't get that at all. It was terrible. And just one from someone else. These are just notes I made in preparation for this. And this is from Inverted Wing, which I think was a YouTube comment. Raiko was doing so well. It's that Laurie, if there's a silver lining, maybe Laurie's innocence can be proven. Yes, we'll get to that when we get to that. And he said, using the Jacksons as a Greek chorus to echo the tarot cards is a neat idea. And yeah, and again, and the Jacksons come back obviously in one of the other stories. But from what I went into this with, by the time I wrote this, I was thinking about the Big Bad Wolf story more than I was thinking about this. So I came into this with no preconceptions. So there's not a lot for me to sort of say I tried to do this with the story, because I wasn't trying to do anything with it. It just sort of came out as it came out. When we do the next one of these, I'm going to be looking at Storybook Woods, and that is quite complicated, or what I was trying to achieve with the Storybook Woods one was quite complicated, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes which is probably in my head but isn't come out in the story. So I think that's going to be a more interesting one to look back on. And I'll probably do that one next and do it in the order I've written on. So anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me ramble on through this, and hope you sort of found it quite interesting. See you next time. Bye.